Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay my deep respect to the Lenape people, their elders and their ancestors of the present, the past, and the future. As we are gathered here together virtually, I invite you to join me in that acknowledgement, in that respect, and I invite you to reflect on the land upon which you stand. If you do not know what land upon which you stand, we will share a resource around land acknowledgements for you to find that out. And at Resilience, as we look into the future, we believe it's important to acknowledge the past and the present. And with that, we are really excited and thrilled to be joined by David Ryan Polgar, who is a leading voice in the areas of tech ethics, digital citizenship, and what it means to be human in the digital age. David is a global speaker, and he's a regular media commentator for both national and international press, and an advisor and consultant and thought leader on building a better tech future. He is the co-host and co-creator of Funny as Tech, which is a New York-based podcast and live show that deals with relationship with technology. And he's also the founder of All Tech is Human, an accelerator for tech consideration and a hub for the responsible tech movement. He has recently developed a digital citizenship class, which we will also share, for adults, and a tech ethics hub for college students. And he serves as a founding member of TikTok's Content Advisory Council, along with the Tech and Adolescent Mental Awareness Program. David, thank you so much for joining us. We're really grateful for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. I think it's definitely time where we talk about how we can build a better tech future. So, yeah, really looking forward to the discussion.
We like to start our conversations with a question about the current moment and the present. So in light of the rapid changes that have taken place over the last few months, from the largest global movement or the largest movement in the United States, the Black Lives Matter movement, which is now on a global scale, creating a lot of important conversation that is taking place, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. Mm-hmm. What do you see clearly now that you didn't see 4 months ago?
What I definitely see clearly now, given everything in our current state today, is that it's not a question of tech. Do we love it? Do we hate it? Right? Mm-hmm. It's something that is widely ingrained in our lives, and it's really our burden and our challenge to create a better tech future, because it's something that is going to be tied in with, as we're seeing, democracy at large. When I think about the smartphone I carry in my pocket every day, it alters how I live, love, learn, even die. It alters the human condition, how I get my news, how I form my reality, the human condition, our psyche. That's a big deal. And I think if there's one thing that this current moment in time has made clear, specifically, let's say with COVID-19, is that we have a certain dependence on technology. I think a lot of the screen time debate has been shifted to say, how do we maximize the potential of technology? How do we ensure that the social networks that we use day in and day out to communicate are something that can extend all voices and can also lead to a better future? I think that one thing that has been made clear is that our vision of the internet and digital tools has really faced a rude awakening, where we've said, okay, I understand the potential and what we set out to do, this kind of utopian vision, specifically around the rise of the web, let's say in the late 90s, to now of saying, all right, well, we obviously have problems with misinformation, disinformation, and you name it. Democracy seems to be in a perilous position right now. And it's up to us to ensure that our digital tools do not amplify hate, do not amplify distrust. It should be doing quite the opposite. And I think that's what the last couple of months have made clear on my end, is that technology and technology policy and our engagement with it. It's not a Ron Popeil set it and forget it. I wish it were that easy. I wish it was about creating a social network or a digital tool and everything just works out naturally well. Uh, but but we know even early on, let's say from the Federalist Papers, that there's a line that says, if men were angels, we wouldn't need government. And what I take from that is that if people were inherently just good people, then we wouldn't need the level of consideration and thoughtfulness around the design and implementation of our tools, because it would just naturally work out well. But one of the things that we're seeing is that technology, it only works in so well as we've designed it and we've thought about the permutations about not only how it should be used, but how it could be potentially misused or abused. And also, I think another part that the last 3 months has made clear in my world is that we really need greater diversity of voices. One thing that personally kind of upsets me a little bit is that I feel like, especially right now, we're falling into a little bit of a trap where we're saying, hey, the current situation's not working out. And then you solely go back to the voices that actually probably got us, crashed the Titanic, and you're asking them to lead your next boat, your voyage. And I would say, well, listen, I might bring in some new people to steer the Titanic too, right? I would ensure that we have all of these different voices. So I think that's another part. And I think a lot of this is about people wanting to be heard. And I think to a large extent, and from my experience with running All Tech is Human, this accelerator for tech consideration, is that people feel like they have a right to participate because the technology that's being created and being deployed, take something like facial recognition, it has dramatic impact on our livelihood, on our safety, on our security. That's something that we have a right to design and to participate. So I like to say that no application without representation. I think that's honestly where we're headed.
Yes, representation is, there's a lot of conversation about representation and what that means and what that looks like, and there are a lot of bottlenecks to getting that representation where it needs to be, especially in the tech space. How have you, from your work and your experience, have you seen any signals that indicate that we are going towards a promising future when it comes to representation, or what do you see as the biggest hurdles in getting there?
There's a lot of hurdles. The way I like to think about it is that in order for this to truly be successful, it's going to be a combination of more socially responsible companies, a media that provides necessary education and oversight, and also really explaining the dynamic nature of a lot of these issues. And you need to have participation, the ability for the general public to participate, and you need to have policymakers that are going to be more proactive. So I think some of the hurdles is that right now we tend to still think of this issue in a very siloed fashion. Anytime there's a problem, right? And there's a lot of problems going on. But anytime there's a problem, let's say specifically in kind of the social media or tech space, we like to say, okay, well then whose fault is it, right? Who needs to do a better job? It's basically how every problem we seem to boil it down, and we say, all right, does that mean that users, they need to be more digital citizens? They need to be more educated, and maybe we need to have a digital citizenship curricula. Maybe we need to have media literacy training for teens, right? We push all these different parts, or then we say, well, maybe it's Facebook's fault. Maybe it's all Mark Zuckerberg. So we tend to just be looking for one source of the problem, whereas I think that's a major hurdle because that's a limitation. And really what I'm trying to do and what a lot of other people are trying to do, which actually is very inspiring because you're seeing so much positive momentum, is that you need to have a paradigm shift to say that this will only be successful. We can only build a better tech future if we can truly come to terms with the fact that this is a complex issue, right? And that I think is a major part of it, because again, we tend to be very kind of monolithic about it and say, okay, maybe it's just about our senators, maybe they need to be, you know, more tech savvy. Whereas I would say it's all of the above, and that's something to always remember. And the other hurdle that I'd really like to point out is that if you're watching this, right, you should be involved. And if you don't have an ability, or if you're not finding a welcome nature to get involved, then that's actually part of the problem. And I will say, like, the most common question that comes my way, because I've been involved in the tech ethics space relatively early on, which means that I interact with a pretty broad range of people. The most common question I tend to get when people reach out my way is they basically say, like, how do I get involved, right? I want to be plugged into the system. Maybe they see media coverage or reading a great book, right? Like Algorithms of Oppression, or, you know, there's a lot of good ones. And they'll say, okay, I'm inspired. I think I have a voice to add. But the problem, and I'm seeing this over and over again, and it's not being solved right now, is that there is not a good way to take that passion and that intelligence and then inject that into the system to make it smarter. So what is normally happening is that right now you have a bunch of really, great organizations out there, and they might have, hey, we've got a fellowship or something like that. But that's still not a broad enough system to allow somebody who is sitting at home in Kenosha, Wisconsin, saying, hey, I've got talent to add to this, and I want my voice to be heard. They don't know where to take that energy. And I think we're doing a great disservice, truly, on not amplifying the energy. And if there's one thing that I'm trying to do, and the goal that I personally have, it's to allow a system where people can get plugged in, right? They want to be part of this ecosystem. But I'm telling you, I'm seeing it all the time. This is, a lot of people will ask about this. It's like they feel frustrated because they basically say, I want to get involved, but I write to people, I don't hear back, or something like that. They don't know where to sign up. They don't know the events to attend. They don't know the people to talk to. So we have a system right now where basically what's happening today is that you have thousands of energized people, and then maybe a couple hundred heavily connected people who are sitting on a lot of intelligence, but we don't really have a system that is extending that collective intelligence and also allowing all of those people to participate. And I think that the only way this is, in my book, a success is if anybody who wants to have their passion felt and their voice heard has the ability to somehow participate. It's easier said than done, because similar to a democracy, you have to create a system that would allow that to kind of inject itself into the system without being kind of too chaotic. So I think that's another part of the equation as well.
Yeah, if you have thoughts of what that might look like, we would love to hear them. But we're also on we host futures thinking workshops. So if anyone comes in on Saturday, I know Saturdays don't always work for you, but we're trying to host a space to ask these sort of how might we questions of how might we get more involved with these conversations? What can we try or be doing to work towards the future that we want? So we are trying to create space for collective intelligence to be shared, to brainstorm these kinds of ideas and solutions, which we're not experts, but
you're doing great work. I mean, but that's so needed. And I, like I said, I think that we're also dealing with the status quo, even in this space of tech ethics and stuff. And I think one of the hurdles is we're realizing that the status quo, as we've seen in a lot of respects today, it's not working. It really isn't. And it needs to be shaken up to extend a system, or really create a system. And it's always difficult because people with power tend to try to maintain that power. So I think a lot of this, in order for it to move forward, is about a certain level of humility, and a certain level of people giving up their, seat of power, to basically say, let's extend it. And to go to that earlier point, I do think that's the problem that's happening, is that, like I said, you have a couple, let's say 100 or so leaders out there that are sitting on really valuable intelligence. So what tends to happen is that people will go out and try to tap into that type of intelligence. But that's not really a good system for kind of sharing that and then making the overall ecosystem better. So, I mean, I see this time in and time again, is that so many of these pockets of knowledge are not kind of extending out. And I think a lot of what we're both trying to do is create a system where it's about knowledge sharing and collaboration. And that's my own kind of personal philosophy. But I find that I say that because what I've noticed is that a lot of people are highly collaborative, and they're really interested. But there's also a lot of people who aren't naturally collaborative. They're like, hey, listen, I just want to sell my book. Like, I just want to do my thing and build my brand, right? So you're always going to run into that, which is honestly one of the challenges. Is a lot of this truly is about being a little more kind of collectivist with a lot of the ideas. And again, that's changing a lot of people's nature, because sometimes people like to kind of, hog their ideas and their recognition around it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agreed. And I think we're in a moment where we're seeing power shift.
Mm-hmm.
And as it does, there's a lot of unlearning and relearning that we all need to do. And that's kind of been a theme that has come up a lot in our conversations of this consciousness about there's a lot of unlearning that needs to take place as well. And it's, we have a responsibility as individuals to the collective. And so I love that you outlined the collective, because that's really key here. I wonder, you talk about the intelligence
Yes.
that exists. I would love for you to share with us some resources that we can lead people to as well, and incorporate into our 2032 story world as well. As you were sharing that, I saw like Christy's face light up. I think that we are all technologists,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is something you kind of alluded to at the beginning.
Yes.
That the fact that with all tech is human, that everybody needs to be part of this conversation, because we are all are not. There are places in the world that don't have access to technology the way that we do, but there is still the use of smartphones is definitely global.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's the key part, is that even going back to your earlier question, talking about the last couple months, what's interesting is we're all collectively right now, whether we acknowledge it or not, I think we're collectively going through this existential crisis as humans.
Yes.
And that's also a time to say this is so important of an issue around tech design, implementation, deployment, that we need to bring in the saints and the poets and the philosophers and the academics and the attorneys. And what I mean by it is we need everyone. And another common interaction I have always had is that somebody will say, hey, I really want to get involved. I have a background, in like sociology, and like how do I get in this space? So we need more social majors, right? Or psychology or something like that. It's like we need all these different backgrounds, because everything we're noticing is that our digital tools are like altering how we view the world. They're altering us as individuals. That is so incredibly important that we don't want to leave it with one type of person. So I think the other issue that we always have to mention is that we should recognize our limitations. And I think one mistake that is being made, in my opinion, is that we right now seem to be, at least from a media narrative perspective, we seem to be trying to put our hopes on like a few individuals. We say, well, wait a minute, maybe it's just about Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey doing a better job. And my response to that is, if we put that much faith and that much power in one person, that is one, it seems anti-democratic, and it just seems highly, highly kind of not participatory, and not recognizing that everybody has their limitations. So what I mean by that is, there's a lot of thousands of think pieces saying, okay, well, doesn't Mark Zuckerberg need to know X, Y, and Z? Whereas I think that's missing the point. The point is that we need to diffuse that power away from a few select individuals, because what we are creating is so important. And I think this is the major shift that's going to happen over the years, is that there is going to have to be some greater level of collaboration between governmental bodies and some of these companies and designers and experts, right? And bridging that together, as opposed to saying, hey, we just want this one actor, we want this one person to be more ethical. Yes, we want people to be more ethical, but the real problem, in my opinion, is that we should not put our hopes in like a few select people. The hope is actually on us as a society. And that's the paradigm shift, is that this is going to require, right? Building a better tech future requires a true societal type of kind of impact and engagement. But again, the hurdle with that, to your earlier question, is that people don't know how to be involved. And that's the issue. So one thing that we're doing with All Tech is Human coming up is that in mid-August, we're going to be releasing a guide to responsible tech, how to get involved and build a better tech future. And that's really just based on, again, my earlier point about people wanting to get involved, but not knowing how. Because, like I can have personal conversations with people and then tell them, hey, talk to these 10 people, talk to these organizations. Here's a couple of jobs in the space. Here's here's some things you can do. But that's completely arbitrary and capricious. That's not based on the fact that somebody can be wherever they are in the world and saying, I want to be involved. And they should know how to get involved. And I think that's the failure over the last couple of years, is that we have not made an easy system, right? We've held that very tightly in a few select brains and organizations.
Yeah. So the next question that we usually ask is, what is your hope for the year 2032 of what future reality we may be living in? And building off of that, I kind of want to frame it around this. How can we be democratizing or using tech to build a more democratic future? And I don't mean, yes, democratic in like the government sense, but also in the like whose voices are being put behind any and all technology, whether that's political or not. So yeah, you have.
Yeah, I am really hopeful because the one joy that I, well, not one joy, one of the joys that I get from being involved with All Tech is Human is that I get to interact with a lot of college and grad students. And I will say that the way they're approaching it is so much more nuanced and dynamic and creative than the current generation, if you will, of leaders in the space. So I am very optimistic. And I think that's going to be the big change, is that the people who are kind of running with this now are going to soon kind of get, it's going to be a changing of the guard. So when I'm thinking about 2032, I'm thinking about just a greater understanding of how important this issue is. So in other words, I think it's going to be common for us to say, hey, when I talk about tech, I'm talking about power and equity and security, right? And participation. I'm talking about societal fabric and democracy. And I think that's going to be something that is going to be more kind of natural. I think what's also going to happen in 2032 is that there is going to have to be obviously a better alignment that a lot of people are talking about now between, being good and doing well, let's say kind of financially. And that's been a major dilemma for a lot of companies, is that there's a complete misalignment between the two. Again, as a lot of people point out, but I think it is important to note. For example, like we care about the spreading of misinformation, but then companies have made a lot of money off of misinformation, because misinformation is highly engaging content that studies have shown tends to actually get higher engagement than actual truthful material, right? So there's this weird perverse incentive sometimes for people to be bad actors and spread misinformation, but there's also the issue where that spreading of misinformation, instead of it being a financial penalty on a company, as if it's like a negative externality, like it would be treated like pollution for a company, right? If a company's polluting, then they get fined, and so it's offering an incentive not to pollute, to be a better person. That I think is a key part, is that we've seen a lot of pollution, if you will, come from tech, but the pollution is advantageous financially. And in 2032, we're going to treat pollution, whether that be misinformation or hate speech, we're going to treat that as a financial penalty. And that changes the equation, because it seems like a cold calculus, but that seemingly is the way that a lot of businesses operate, in the sense that when they're looking at a lot of this, they want to say, okay, how are we going to kind of maximize our value? But even from a startup level, I remember about 2 years ago, for our first All Tech is Human event, there was a younger startup, and during kind of like a Q&A, he raised his hand. He said, hey, this is great. We want to care about data ethics. But my financiers, right, my VC people, they need me to be successful. And data is valuable, and data is what's going to make money. So you see the problem is that you have somebody who's trying to be a good actor, but you're also in a Shark Tank. You're also in a highly competitive startup world, or even in all tech companies are also highly competitive. So everybody is trying to kind of maximize their position. So in order for this to work, it's not solely about getting people to personally do the right thing. It's also creating a structure where doing the right thing is what we can show value in our own kind of economic system as well. And it's completely not working, right? If it was a fairer world, then the folks behind DuckDuckGo would be billionaires, but that's not the case. And I think it's also showing that we have a lot that needs to change in the coming years.
Yes, I wanted to allude to privacy, because I feel like the literacy I am picking up on that people are building around tech right now, because of the pandemic and other recent issues, including, for example, the hack that happened in the last 24 hours on Twitter, that people are kind of building that literacy a little bit around their privacy, or let's hope they are. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on data privacy specifically in light of what you just shared.
I've got a lot to say on that, and one of the things that I will say around privacy, and then a lot of the work that came out from Edward Snowden kind of pointed this out too, is that it's not just about your individual behavior, and I want to emphasize that, because I think a problem that I've seen in the last couple of years is that anytime we talk about privacy, it tends to lead to a media story where you bring on an expert who says, all right, this is why you need to create better passwords and be careful with, with who knows it, and, do cleaning, digital hygiene. So they put all the burden on the onus on the individual. But that's complete and utter BS, because what we need to really recognize and come to grips with is that so much of the problems around privacy are totally out of our hands, which is also why I think we as individuals sometimes feel highly vulnerable. I mean, you should feel really vulnerable because, right, you're talking about the Twitter hack. And I think a lot of people out there are saying, my God, if Barack Obama and Bill Gates and Elon Musk, if their accounts can get hacked, is it really about me just having a better password? There's deeper issues with this. And I think that's a key part, is that we cannot solely put the burden on individuals, because this is about a larger system that is kind of happening, where we need to have this natural oversight. So there's one thing, I mean, I'm glad you brought up that Twitter hack, because it is major. Not because, hey, some people lost money in Bitcoin through that scam, but what it showed that these systems that we've created that are now influencing our whole media narrative and democracy, right? Because media folks, they love Twitter and they're constantly looking for stories. What it shows is that we as society over the last couple of years, we've become so engaged with social media as a platform to be an amplification, and really, or a method for direct communication between, let's say, political figures. So the big concern is that now we basically said that, hey, what I hear from somebody's Twitter account is the same as if I physically watch that person enter a TV studio and deliver a broadcast, right? So that's what we've done. But what's tricky about that is we're allowing that same level of trust over something that is coming not physically, and it's come through an avatar, you usually just typed. So you've got a lot of problems there, because if we're going to have a system where Twitter is going to be this type of kind of media outlet, if you will, then it needs to have the same level of security as a media outlet. And something else I'd love to add there is that we love to say that, especially Twitter and social media, we love to say that they are a public square. And my point is, one, they're completely not legally a public square, so you've got that problem. But two, is that if we truly think that social media should be a public square, then that would mean that we need to have the same level of structure to create a public square. So in other words, with that Twitter hack, part of the problem was that if Twitter is now in the responsible position, right, in the position of power to actually have a tool that is dramatically influencing political discourse and geopolitical movements and stock markets, right? Don't forget, a bunch of years ago, there was when there was President Obama, there was a kind of a hacking, and then kind of like a fake post, and saying that President Obama was injured, and they quickly found out it wasn't. But what happened was there was a stock market dive. The point being is that Twitter now is in a position where they are affecting the world at large. So that means that the only reason they should have that power is if they can control that power. So I think a lot of what's happening over the next couple of years, or is going to have to happen, is that people are going to have to decide, how do we diffuse this power or create some greater level of oversight and structure around it? Because tech companies, they like to scale everything, right? And they tend not to be, they tend not to be very good at creating a lot of structure, because structure, if you think about it, is the opposite of scalability, right? Because when you're thinking about a product to make it more profitable, you're thinking, okay, I can make more money by having this extended. You're not thinking about the people that usually need to go in and do the hard work to actually make something truly work. And I think what I always like to point out is that, frankly, I think in 2020, a lot of social media companies are in over their head, in over their skis, in that they are affecting discourse, but they don't have the mechanisms set in place to handle the responsibility of affecting civil discourse.
If you were going to design a future social media platform, what kinds of things would you do differently than the social media platforms that you're seeing now?
Yeah, I think you're going to have less profitability, because the only way it's going to work, specifically from content moderation, an area that I'm deeply involved in, is that it only works if you have a tremendous amount of people involved throughout the world. So in my design of a social media platform, you're going to have content moderators hired in every country where the platform is operating. That's obviously not the case right now, and that needs to happen, right? Because we like to think about it from, here I am sitting in the United States. Well, we know of all the problems that we have from an American standpoint. Now, imagine that happening in so many different cultural contexts that we don't understand, and in so many languages that we don't speak. And therein lies the problem. I think we've also seen the limitation of AI as in its use for content moderation early on. It was seen as very promising. But my design of a social media platform would realize kind of the nuance of speech, and would really would think about it in that greater structure. So the way I would design it is that, it sounds a little funny right now, but the social media platform of the future is going to have a judicial branch, a legislative branch, and an executive branch. It really will. And you might say, well, what is this guy talking about? Well, we know that Facebook, recently launched their oversight board, which was originally described by Zuckerberg as a, Facebook Supreme Court, and then also in the media. And that struck people as odd, but it's not really odd in the sense that you're mediating speech, and speech is incredibly nuanced, that you need to understand context and culture. So the current flaw of social media is that it doesn't have the ability to separate itself from its creating the laws around what appropriate speech is, and then also enforcing them. It's the problem that we've had throughout history. If you create a system where somebody is the judge, jury, and executioner, well, imagine if I could create a law and then I could determine who's violating the law, and then I get to enforce who I kick out. You would say, my God, this guy has way too much power, right? And also, it's completely arbitrary. I think that's what we're also kind of realizing is happening to a large extent with a lot of social media platforms. So we need to move away from that. But that's also going to need to have a lot more ability to kind of infuse the general public, and then determine how we separate these kind of branches. But that's something that other industries have done over the years too. Even if you think about media outlets, they have a tremendous amount of potential pressure with writing favorable articles about advertisers, right? So if you're the New York Times, you have to completely separate the two. And you have to say, okay, here's kind of our newsroom. Here's how we separate it to make sure that it's not negatively or wrongly affected by the two. So you treat them as kind of church and state. And the same thing really is going to happen in my social media platform. It's going to be designed in a way that you're saying, here are the laws, right? Here's appropriate speech. But then there's got to be another group that is determining whether that's a true violation. And then there's another group that's actually enforcing that. And then again, to emphasize the earlier point, it's got to be not entirely scalable in the sense that every country we're going to be in, it's going to have its own kind of like individuals from that area. Because really it's tough for let's say a person like me to make decisions about cultures that I don't understand. And I think that is inherently flawed, to realize that speech is so nuanced.
Yes, that's such an important point. Thank you for bringing that up. I want to, before we move on from the future of social media, I am very curious about whether you think we should be concerned about using TikTok in this moment.
Well, what's interesting about that is that the larger point that's happening is that people feel vulnerable if they don't have transparency, right? So I know with TikTok specifically, they are opening up a transparency center in Los Angeles that is supposed to alleviate a lot of these concerns. I got pushed off with COVID, but I really think that transparency centers and greater natural kind of oversight with researchers and with media is going to be the solution. Because what's really interesting about what's going on now is that you start seeing everybody throughout the world is distrustful, right? So you've got this big media storm that's happening with Americans saying, should I trust TikTok if it's got ownership through ByteDance, which is based in China, right? Obviously, TikTok has said that none of the information is stored in China, and they don't run TikTok as an app in China. And then they also recently got out of Hong Kong when there was the potential for them to have to kind of abide by the Chinese law. But what I think was also kind of fascinating is then today everybody's talking about how in Europe, right, they just had a new ruling where they might alter kind of that shield that they have between data going from Europe to the United States. So you have a lot of Europeans who are distrustful of their information being held in the United States. So what I'm pointing out is that it's kind of a fascinating time in 2020 because you've got Americans that are worried about Chinese, not taking care of their information as it should be. And then you have Europeans who are looking at Americans saying, well, no, actually, I'm worried about Americans keeping track of the data. So I think if we put that together, that means that everybody should be worried about making sure that their data is properly kept. And I think that's the bigger issue that we need to get a hold of, and that's why I brought up Snowden kind of earlier, which obviously pointed out a lot of these issues for people to say that data, if used kind of incorrectly or if in the wrong hands, can really be used as a kind of surveillance tool, and it's something that everybody is concerned with and should be concerned with. So I think that's the key part that's going to happen. So I think from TikTok's perspective or from any company's perspective, the burden is on them right now to almost showcase, here is why you should trust me, and not solely base it on their kind of assertions of faith, right? It should clearly point out the level of transparency, and also kind of clearly indicate where their data is held, and move it beyond something that is a verbal kind of assertion. I think that's probably where we're headed with this.
Christy, I know you had the question.
Well, yeah, I was asking of, like, as we talk about transparency, we see a lot in the climate movement, what's known as greenwashing. And I'm curious, like, even if they say, oh, this is why you should trust us, why should we trust their assertion of why we trust them?
Well, that's what I was pointing out, of saying that it needs to be something a little more oversight based, right? It needs to be something where, that's why I mentioned the Transparency Center that's opening up in LA, because it needs to be something where you say, okay, you've got the company saying, hey, your information is held in the United States, but then you also have to have the ability to verify, that. I mean, I guess it's that classic adage from the Cold War, right? Trust but verify. So I think that's maybe where we're going with a lot of our data, because as we saw obviously after Cambridge Analytica, you've got a lot of social media companies where we are kind of in the mix of whether or not we should trust them. So, and then the other thing I'd like to point out, which might be kind of less obvious with a lot of these stories going on, is that we're also in kind of a weird moment where every company is also probably trying to get a competitive advantage. All social media companies spend a lot of money on lobbyists in DC. And, it's always something to be a little mindful of, to try to separate fact from whether a company might have an agenda, right? So what I'm saying there is, like, all social media companies, they're all trying to kind of be competitive with one another, which means that there seems to be a little bit of an incentive sometimes to say, hey, don't put the focus on me, focus on these other individuals. And that's actually been shown to be the internal dialogue for a lot of companies. Back when there was Google Plus, hey, remember that platform? Not many people do, I guess. But there was a situation where they had I believe it was like a data loss or data hacking, but they didn't come clean. One, because maybe there needs to be better laws about the penalties or the need to kind of come clean really quickly. But two, some of the internal dialogues was basically saying, you had folks at Google saying, well, everybody's focused right now on the problems of Facebook. We kind of want them to stay on Facebook, right? Not put the attention on us. So I think that's another key part that we need to think about, is that in order for us to truly trust social media companies, big tech companies, we need to have the ability to puncture their kind of communications team. I think that's something that should be kind of pointed out, is that where we are in 2020 is a lot of tech companies are very nervous about press, and oftentimes reluctant to say anything that could lead to bad press, right? So I think that's part of the issue, is that we need to create a system where we can have better kind of media oversight, but also access. And I think our access to verifiable information is where we have to be headed.
Thank you for that important reminder. I want to ask about possible future milestones that could happen in the next 12 years that would have the power to shape our everyday life in 2032.
Yeah, I think some milestones are really kind of going to that earlier point. They're going to have to be around transparency. I think another milestone is going to be some type of true reassessment of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996, which offers that broad immunity to social media companies that are acting as really a conduit for user-generated content, as opposed to being seen as a publisher. I think what we're seeing is that we have a lot of editorial control, or social media companies have a lot of editorial control, which means that now you have the general public thinking of them as kind of a hybrid system, like a little bit of a utility company, a little bit of a media company. And we need to define that. So a milestone is really going to be defining what is a social media company, because I think that has been really part of the problem, is that we haven't defined it. Just a quick example is that some of the issues, let's say, around Facebook and how they were dealing with the president's kind of messaging. On one hand, they were saying, okay, we treat everybody equal under our terms of service and community guidelines, But then on the other hand, they were saying, well, if it's the president, well, then it's newsworthy. And that's true from a media standpoint. And that's the way you tend to think about something in terms of like how you run certain content. That's also why they might sometimes allow certain kind of content to be posted that might seem, like a swear word or something like that. They'll put verbatim in the paper. But the key part is that the social media company needs to decide what it actually is, because if it is, if it's treated as a public square, then we are treating them as if they are the government, right? And that is not supposed to infringe our speech, right? So we're taking it from that type of free expression standpoint. But the only way that works is if everybody is treated equally, because that's always a big problem under any kind of First Amendment type of case, is that if any law or ordinance is seen as arbitrary and capricious and not treating people equally, then that's a fundamental flaw, and that's something that we would say is a violation of the First Amendment. So I think if we're going to start extending our understanding of the First Amendment in the United States to social media companies, which is obviously a hot topic right now, then we are going to start needing to define that. So I think that's going to be another milestone. So to summarize, right, a couple of years ahead, we need to define it. We need to change some of the laws around it. So I think that's the big part. And then also another big milestone, especially since you asked the data privacy types of questions, is having a national kind of data privacy law and protection. Obviously, we've seen a lot of movement in California, which is kind of mimicking to a certain extent a lot of the protections from GDPR. I think that another milestone will be a national privacy law, right? Where's our GDPR?
Yes. Yes, where is our GDPR? This came up in previous conversations, and it was surprising to see how so many people don't realize how behind we are in the US in terms of policy. Let's talk about language and the nomenclature of your vision for the future in terms of the language we could be incorporating in our daily life around the literacy that is required.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the terms that I've used for a bunch of years is around digital citizenship, and I use that in the sense that we need to start thinking of ourselves as citizens. If there's one part that needs to change, it's that we oftentimes refer to people as users of a platform, which I don't know. I think it always kind of comes across as somewhat offensive, in the sense that you have people who are participants and actively altering the actual product and the design and the environment, right? So they're not using it, right? Like if I am, like if I'm using a blender, right? That I'm just pushing a button and it's going as it's supposed to go. Whereas if I'm on social media, like if I'm on a platform, I am part of the environment, right? So the phrasing that's going to have to change is a better term for it. I haven't come up with it yet. If anybody watching has one, we need a term to say we're not users of social media. What are we? So again, I mean, you could say, say again.
This feels super parallel to like the work that we're doing is participatory theater of like, you're not an audience. You're not you usually use player or user in game world. You're participating. You are bringing your voice in. So we have this same question, and usually we wind up using the word participant.
Yes.
But it still doesn't quite feel.
I know. So
like
if we come up with one, maybe we could. I like it. So that's what we're going to have to do, but that's what we are, because how are we a user of Facebook? Aren't we, like you said, aren't we Facebook? Aren't we participating? Aren't we the very thing that other people are seeing? Aren't we what's altering the, whether it's toxic or whether it's safe and inclusive, right? We're the ones who are kind of determining that. So that's where I think a lot of people also use kind of citizens and how like a community or town or city might alter by its activism around how it's designing something. And as Eli Perzer says in his new TED Talk, talking about a lot of this, spaces, they affect behavior, right? Our design of spaces affect behavior as well. So we need to start having a greater language around the actual designers and then also those participants as well. And then I think lastly, the other new term that's going to happen is we need something that is more inclusive around these tech society issues. So I know a lot of times I might even use like a, slash like tech society. This is what we're talking about. But I think the problem is that too many people, they see tech and they think that you have to be in tech, right? And they say, well, this is just for technologists. I said, no, we want technologists and we want artists and designers and advocates and students and academics. And we want you, right? We want you to be involved. And also the key part is we want you to feel like you can be involved and have the ability to be involved. So I'm looking for a better term along those lines too. And that's also, I got to say, a little less academic, because one thing that I've seen in my world, or at least what I kind of focus on, is that I think there's a tremendous potential to really extend a lot of these issues, and that what a lot of times people say I am is they say, well, you're kind of like a translator, and what they mean by it is that what you find is if you hop between a lot of different groups, they might be talking about the same thing, but they're using different terms, right? And that's another issue that's going on, is understanding language and then maybe even having better shared language for some of these issues that we're talking about.
Okay, we will bring this up in our writer's room session. And we'll get back to you about how we can define and redefine some of the terminologies or the language, and kind of a repositioning of any person that interacts with technology kind of then is by default a technologist. And the accountability and responsibility is like we all have a certain level of responsibility yes. that we can enforce in the space. And I think it really is a conversation of power, about power shifting and transparency. And I appreciate your vision for the social media platform of the future, because media is like the fourth branch of the government, really, or of power. And if we thought about these spaces with that much responsibility and accountability to citizens, maybe we would change the behavior. And thank you so much for pointing out the importance of designing spaces with intention. And I think that's something that is a quotable moment here today.
Well, that's what the future is going to have to be, right? More intentional social media, more intentional tech, because we're also realizing the consequences of not being intentional. And something I always like to point out is that it seems like so often right now we interview, let's say, tech leaders, and they say, well, man, I couldn't have thought of this. I had no idea that this could be used for authoritarian governments or something like that. And what I think we need to mention is that if you are truly surprised by this, then that also means that you're not bringing in the right people, that you are not extending the imagination of your group of designers and others to consider the different possible futures. Because if you are saying, hey, this is like an unintended consequence, I think that's also a failure of the present not to think about the likelihood of downstream impact, the likelihood of negative externalities, and how products can be abused and misused, right? So there should never really be unintended consequences in the extent that we should be thinking about these a lot more. Right. And our failure today has been not extending kind of the inclusive nature of a lot of these companies to challenge how the future is going to evolve.
Yes. Thank you so much. for that thoughtful comment. I want to end our conversation with your call to action. Outside of the report that you're working on with All Tech is Human, which people will be able to find in the story world as they interact with 2032 in August, what is your call to action to our participants?
The call to action is that if you're watching this, you should be involved. And also, you should have the ability to be involved, and your voice should have the ability to be heard, and that you should have the ability to affect the design and deployment of emerging technologies. So the call to action is to make yourself heard, to make yourself seen. And I know it's not easy right now because there are a lot of hurdles, like we discussed today. There are hurdles in not knowing how to get involved. But my call to action is, this is changing right now. I'm seeing it firsthand, inspired by all the great people that I get to interact with. And I am hopeful and optimistic for the future. It's not going to be easy, but I run into great individuals who are passionate every day. So that's the call to action, is to be one of those passionate individuals and to actually start changing this for the better and to get involved. So yeah, reach out my way if you want. Reach out to other people. There's a lot of great individuals, and the biggest issue I've always seen is that people feel like they are alone in the space, or that they're the only person who is passionate or concerned about it, and that's just not true. And if you are one of those passionate, concerned people, then find these opportunities and be part of this system that is building a better tech future.
Thank you so much. And I'd love for you to share with us some resources of like how people can do that. So I know All Tech is Human are on all platforms. They can also check out your podcast to deepen their knowledge and literacy around technology and ethics. And David, thank you so much for being with us today. We are really grateful for all the insights and your visioning and envisioning of the future that we are no doubt going to be incorporating into our 2032 reality.
Well, I was really excited and privileged to be here today, and hopefully be part of the better tech future that we're all creating together.
Yes.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.